get that going. So here we are getting going right now with what iridology can and can't do, what iridologists can and can't say. This is a very, very important topic. It's as important as understanding how to do iridology itself. It truly is, because it actually does demonstrate whether you know what you're doing or not. Before we start, I'm just going to invite you to hop on over to iridology.education to look for the little pop-up that happens there. And it's going to be a pop-up that offers you an iridology map. And so opt in for that. That'll get you on my mailing list, and it will keep you apprised of when we do these kinds of little free educational events. There have been so many misconceptions about iridology, and they are being perpetrated by people who have been trained in archaic and disproven iridology methodologies. And that's a problem, because those old school people are still out there. They're still teaching, they're still practicing. And yes, I am speaking boldly against them, because they give us all a bad name. They give us all a bad name. Iridologists who are up to date, who practice constitutional iridology, those are the people you want to be following for iridology, because they are using the most up-to-date research. They are updating their information as new research comes out. They're not stuck 50 years in the past. And so as we do this, I want to remind you that the chat boxes and the comment boxes are open. We can have a little conversation as we're doing this, and that's always fun. So I invite your comments. I am going to be doing my best to monitor all three platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and the webinar. And so there we have it. Let's look at an eyeball. Here we go. Here we've got an eyeball. All right. This iris shows a very resilient pattern overall. As we look at this particular eye, we're going to see that there are in it some indications of slight inherent predispositions to a lower resilience in the digestive zone, okay, and in the surface blood and lymph and detoxification through the skin. But other than that, the fiber structure here is really, really nice. It's fine, it's fairly straight, and it's got a really high thread count per square inch. That is how we gauge resiliency. That is so important. Even when we see eyes like this that suggest a really strong resiliency, we have to consider why the client has symptoms, because sometimes the symptoms don't actually match what we think they should based on their eyes, right? And so we need to understand what their symptoms are, and we need to use what we see in the eyes to help explain what those symptoms are, because it's not always going to be an obvious connection. And we can never look at an eye without the context of the story of where the client is now and do an assessment. That is the most incorrect thing you can possibly do with iridology, is to do an iris assessment cold without a conversation with the client. I have lots of people ask me, can I send you my pictures? Will you do an iris assessment? And the only way I will do that is two things. Number one, if the photos are really good and clear, like not done with a cell phone. They've got to be done well. And number two, if we can actually have an online appointment to discuss the eye photos and to just have a conversation with the client, so I can understand where the client is coming from. Because iridology is not a crystal ball. It is not a crystal ball. You know, the comparison that I make, because I grew up in a car family. My dad had a car dealership for like a gazillion years. And so car analogies just work really well in our family. A Rolls Royce can be driven into the ground if it's not cared for properly. A car of lesser quality can last a lot of years if it is maintained appropriately. The exact same thing is true of people. We might have a client whose eyes suggest this person has inherently a very robust, very strong, a very resilient body, and yet because it was so strong and so resilient, this person may not have understood that they needed to take care of themselves. And as such, while they won't have changed what we see in their eyes, they will have changed through abuse and neglect how their body works. And that is a really important distinction to make. Likewise, we can have someone whose eyes suggest they don't have excellent resiliency, and yet they come in and they have very few symptoms. And that will be because they learned at a very young age that they had to live by rules, that they had to get enough sleep, they had to eat the right kinds of foods, they had to take care of their mental health. And because they've done that, they have protected their body's ability to function, and their body now functions and has functioned all along with obeying those rules at its maximum potential. So we need to be very aware of things like that when we are looking at eyes and having conversations with clients. So this would be an example of someone who, when we look at their eye up front, we think, oh, that person has a lot of inherent tendencies that are less resilient. This person has some connective tissue issues possibly. They are predisposed to them, so they might be more prone to strains and sprains and sloppy joints and things like that. We see other things in here that suggest inherent tendencies towards being less resilient, aka potentially having more issues. And yet if this person does everything they need to do, if they learn the rules of their body early on, they will see really nice results and they can experience really good health. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're 50 and you've got an eye like this and you haven't taken care of your body and you want to start now, that it's hopeless. Not at all. It's just going to take a bit longer because your body has some inherent weaknesses and it's a little run down. It hasn't been cared for. It's going to take some time to actually build the strength and the integrity back up, to build that base to on which to build good health. And it's going to take time, but there will be incremental improvements along the way. It is totally wrong to look at an eye like this and say, oh my goodness, that person is sick. Oh, that person has all these health problems. You cannot tell that by looking at an eye. You can ask questions to see if that's true, because you can see from the eye that those are the inherent predispositions, but you cannot make the statement, this person is unhealthy, this person is sick, this person is full of toxins. You cannot make that by looking at the eye, because the eye is inherent and the iris itself does not tell you what the client has been doing to take care of themselves. The eyes will not change when we change the diet. And when I say the eye, I'm referring specifically to the iris. The iris will not change with dietary changes. The structure, the fibers are not going to move. The pigments are not going to dissolve. The eye is not going to clean up. This is inherent. What will change when we make the changes, the obvious things that we're going to see, is that the sclera will clear up. Where the iris is inherent, the sclera is very dynamic. Your parents gave you this, you gave you this. And so when we look here and we understand how to analyze what we see in the sclera, we then understand what are the current situations in the body. And from there, we can deduce, as we combine that with what we see in the iris, what we need to be doing for homework to improve this person's health. When clients come in with symptoms that don't match their irides, it's because they've earned those symptoms. While again, the irides are a blueprint of the body that shows us the inherent patterns and tendencies in the body, the irides do not account for abuse that is dished out to the body. It might not even be something as obvious as smoking. It might be something simple like skimpy on sleep or having a sedentary lifestyle. It's really important to remember that iridology informs us as to the best way to care for the body. Iridology helps us to understand what the nutritional requirements are, what the specific needs are within the body. And that's an important thing for us to know. In order for us to truly help people, we iridologists have to have other modalities as well. For example, we need to know nutrition and or herbology and or aromatherapy and or body work and or spinal alignment techniques. We can't just do iridology. Doing just iridology is very much like taking your car into the auto repair shop, and the guy there runs all of the tests on your car. He says, yep, I know what's wrong, but I can't fix it. I don't have the ability to fix it. I don't know how. I just know what's wrong. You have to take your car to Joe down the street. He knows how to fix this. Like, what the heck? How useful is that? It's actually not. And so we need to make sure that as iridologists that we have more than just iridology under our belt. I get people coming in and I'm happy to give them an hour of my time and they say, I'm just certified as an iridologist. How do I set up a business? And my answer to them is always, what else do you do? What do you mean, what else do I do? Well, do you know nutrition? Well, no. Do you know herbology? Well, no. Do you know aromatherapy? Well, no. Well, what else do you know? Well, nothing. I'm just certified in iridology. Does you no good. So you can identify marks in the eyes, but you don't know anatomy and physiology to know what they really mean. You don't understand other things that you can do to help balance the body. It does you no good. It does your clients no good either. That may sound harsh, but it's the truth. And I'm not one to pull punches. I'm not one to, say things to make people feel good. And so, as we look at eyes, one of the myths that is out there is this. And this is one that drives me crazy because I see this all over the internet. And that is that we can disperse pigment. I am going to say, there's so many indicators in the eyes, but one of them is not the dispersal of pigment. As iridologists, we cannot name a disease. We cannot diagnose. We cannot prescribe. We may say things in an eye that suggest that this person inherently is more predisposed to a certain health condition, but we are not licensed medical practitioners. We cannot diagnose and prescribe. And even if you are a licensed medical practitioner, like Roberto, who's just joined us on the webinar. Hello, Roberto, good to see you. Even he cannot diagnose based on iridology. Just saying. So when we see markings in the eyes that suggest someone has an issue, we cannot say you have this problem, but we can say, is there a personal or a family history of whatever the issue is? Even if the client says he has, for example, a blood sugar issue, we cannot give it that name. We can teach him about markings that we see in his eyes. We can share with him information that will help him to balance his metabolism. We may see corroborating indicators in those eyes, but we always need to ask if they've had a medical diagnosis. And we always need to, and this is, some of you, this is really going to grate you the wrong way, and I know that. But because we are not licensed medical practitioners, we always need to suggest that our client go for medical testing if we suspect something serious is going on. Do you hear what I'm saying? Okay, so we do a tremendous disservice, and we are being potentially dangerous for our client if we actually do an analysis on social media, and if we do not have a real-time conversation with our client. As the practitioner, the information that is provided, that so many people provide in an online assessment where they just give this long list of what they see in an eye, the long list of what they think it means, and then this long list of homework the client needs to do, in my opinion, is overwhelming and does a complete disservice, because you don't actually know from looking at these pictures online what is going on in the person's body. Okay, this is so important. Now, in my experience, I've been at this for 40 years. That's a 40 years. I'm not a new kid on the block. I'm not still wet behind the ears. And I will tell you, the worst thing you can do to a client is give them too much information, is to overwhelm them and snowball them. Because when you do that, they will take no action whatsoever. And then they do not make progress. Roberto is asking a quick question. Do you use some food sensitivity testings, hormonal measurements, etc., that are commonly used by natural practitioners? Good question, Roberto. I have access to an alternative lab that will do food sensitivity testing and can also do zonulin testing. Because of what my credentials are as a herbalist and a nutrition coach, I do not have access to a lab that will do hormone testing. So I sometimes need to refer my clients out for things like that, which I'm happy to do. All right, so as we look at an eye like this, one of the things that you're going to see is that people are going to look at eyes like this. And I don't know if you can see this clearly. These are actually the same eye. What's your first response when you see that? We've got a bit of a reflection of my camera in this one. Look at the color difference of the eye itself. Look at the fact that this eye on the left of your screen has no extra pigment between 6 o'clock and 8:30. This one has some brown stuff between 6 o'clock and 8:30. A lot of people would look at this and would say, oh my goodness, it looks like from here to here. So from the image on the left to the image on the right, the client did a massive amount of cleansing. Look at the blueness. Look at how those eyes became blue. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. The image on the left was taken with a camera. It's a flash, an incandescent flash and print film. And anybody who has done print knows that Kodak film used to print to the red side. Fujifilm used to print to the green side. Just saying. The image on the right was taken 23 years later, and it was done with a 28 megapixel digital camera that has an LED flash that was set for fluorescent lighting, which means that the color difference, look at the difference in the tones of the skin. Look at the difference in the color of the sclera. It means that what has changed here primarily is the technology, because the technology has changed the overall color of the eye. What technology did not add here is this pigment that is in the image that is the newer image, the one that was just actually done a couple of years ago. This tells us that from the age of 42 to the age of 65, something in this gentleman's liver has activated and potentially is affecting many different things in his body. We can cleanse this fellow till we are blue in the face. We can cleanse him until he turns green because he's had so many leafy greens, and that pigment is not going to go away. We do not bleach out or blanch out or disperse pigment once it has accumulated. Okay, it accumulates on genetic cue. So as this pigment started to accumulate, it was a genetic cue that said the liver is predisposed to having issues at this point in his life. Good to know. Good to know. And that's exactly what we've seen happen in his world. Exactly. Then we have a little case study. We'll do this case study, and I'm going to try to get rid of as much glare as I can for those of you who are on Instagram to give you the best pictures possible, which is a little bit challenging. These are the eyes of a female who was age 44 when we took these pictures. And she was 5'10", weighed 200 pounds, and was starting to gain weight. And she was not happy with that. There's not a lot of people in the world who want to weigh more. She also had suffered with depression that was worse in the wintertime and was using Zoloft for that. She had joint aches and she had very, very painful periods. As we looked at her images, what we notice here is several things. When we look at the fiber structure, she has an inherent predisposition towards connective tissue issues. So she's likely going to be prone to sprains and breaks and joint problems and things like that. She has a central heterochromia, and the pigmentation of this suggests her liver wants to be running the show, or ruining the show, as we sometimes say. Now, remember, when we look at liver, in traditional Chinese medicine, liver is the seat of depression, but liver also balances the hormones. So she inherently is predisposed to having those liver stresses that are going to mess up her moods and her hormones. We also have some dirty yellow attached to this central heterochromia, which suggests that she is prone to some kidney issues and some inherent kidney challenges. Now, again, think about this for a moment, because kidney in traditional Chinese medicine regulates joints, right? We also have right here what we call a shoe lacuna. So in her left eye, we have this two-part lacuna that looks like a shoe, looks like a footprint. And when we see that, again, that always suggests, no matter where it is in the eye, an inherent predisposition towards kidney. Kidneys balance acid, and that affects the joints. And when we look at the fact that she is prone to the elevated acid from the kidneys, we know that weight gain is always inflammation based, right? So we look at all that and we start putting it together. You would never put that together if you were just looking at individual markings and if you didn't understand how things work. So I asked her about her digestion, and she said that she has no symptoms, but her eyes suggest there's an inherent challenge there. So I asked her what her bowel movements were like, and she said they're rabbit pellets, so she poops little balls, right? I asked her about her coffee consumption, because coffee is hard on the liver, and if we want to get that liver on side, we need to be nice to it. And she said she was drinking 3 or 4 cups a day. And, you know, I gotta say that regardless of what everyone says about coffee being good for you, it's not. Actually, let me take that back. If you would take it by an enema and get it up through the hepatic portal, you'd be fine. But when it goes down through the mouth, the things that it does to your stomach, your intestinal tract, your thyroid, your liver, your adrenal glands, your bones, it's unforgivable. Coffee is not good for you. And so we looked again at all of those things, and we know that the coffee increases the inflammation, and it does it really for her. So on her first appointment, we suggested that she needed to get rid of the coffee, and because it was affecting so many of her possible symptoms, and also suggested that she should use a digestive enzyme. I prefer the Nature Sunshine products, and so we used a Nature Sunshine enzyme with her, and that we needed to get a good portion, a generous portion of leafy greens every day. In her second appointment, which was about a month later, she had done everything to a T. I love it when my clients follow instructions. And because I'd only given her 3 things to do, she was able to do all of them. She followed the recommendations to a T. She noticed within that month alone that her joints were less sore, that her periods were improving, and that her depression was moderately improved as well. So then we built on what we'd started. This is the proper way to create a program. You never give everybody everything they need to know in one sitting, because it never works. So I asked her about her water intake, because her kidneys need water. She was drinking 3 glasses a day. At her body weight, that is nowhere near enough. I asked her about her sleep, because the liver is also the seat of insomnia, according to traditional Chinese medicine. She said that her sleep is broken up. She spends her whole night catnapping. Not good. That's not how we regenerate. It's not how we deal with depression. It's not good. So then I suggested rather, that she needed to get protein at every meal. And with that, we needed to get some vegetarian proteins. I also suggested that she should go to her doctor for a SAD lamp, for a seasonal affective disorder lamp, We live north of the 49th parallel, and winter depression is a huge thing, but it can be totally mitigated by using the right kind of light. Also suggested that she needed to get 30 minutes of gentle exercise every day and increase her water to 6 glasses a day. So Roberto was asking online, he says, I've downloaded your iridology chart already. Yay! What iridology software do you use as an aid? I don't. You don't need iridology software. When you know what you're looking at, when you know how the markings interact with each other, when you know what questions to ask, you don't need software, because software is going to miss all of those very subtle connections. This is what I teach in my course. I don't just teach what the markings are. I teach how they interact. I teach you how to ask the questions. I teach you how to actually implement iridology. I think using iridology analysis software is horrible, just horrible. I think it takes the intuition and it takes the skill and it takes the insight completely out of the picture, and it means that your analysis is going to be 10% of what it could have been. Just my perspective. You can tell I'm very passionate about that. I do not believe in using iridology software at all, ever. Okay, and so on the third appointment with this client, so this is a month later again, she had been to her doctor and she had gotten a prescription for an SAD lamp. And the only reason we need the prescription, we can buy them over the counter, but if she has a prescription, it becomes a tax write-off. Yay! At least in Canada, it does. So she got that, she'd been using it, and she actually loved it. She just loved it. 30 minutes within the first hour of getting up in the morning, she would have that lamp on and she'd get on her treadmill and she'd treadmill with the light shining on her. So she was getting her activity, her 30 minutes of activity, plus her 30 minutes of artificial sunshine. And she said that she was feeling so energized, that her energy had just so improved. Her mindset had so improved. She'd done a great job with starting to increase her protein, which we continue to push her with. And she was doing really well with drinking enough water. Now, do you see how this works? I did not diagnose anything. I did not give her a prescription for anything. I simply was able to take what I see in her eyes, combine that with the symptoms she brought in, and use the eyes, the irides particularly, to help me understand why her symptoms are the way they are. And then knowing that, I was able to make dietary suggestions and lifestyle recommendations and suggest she go to her doctor for some other things to get tremendous results for herself. And it's so exciting to watch this metamorphosis as clients follow through. So iridologists can absolutely not. Did I make that clear? They cannot diagnose or prescribe. And here's what I'm hoping you're going to take away from this today, and we've got a few minutes left here, is that too many iridologists are using old and disproven methods, and they're giving bad information to their clients because they are diagnosing, they are prescribing, they are stating claims, they are saying, you have a problem with your kidneys. Your eyes say you have a problem with your stomach. The eyes don't say any such thing. The eyes say there's inherent predisposition to things like that. But depending on what your client has done for their health will determine whether they actually have a problem or not. As iridologists, we are not medical doctors, and we should not pretend to be. We should not be diagnosing or prescribing, and even medical doctors who use iridology should not be diagnosing or prescribing from iridology. They should be, like the rest of us, using iridology to guide their questions, to guide what further tests they ask for, and then use all of it combined to make a proper assessment, and in the case of a medical doctor, a proper diagnosis. The safest way to practice iridology and to be of the best service of your clients is to study and use constitutional iridology as a guide to assess your client's irides and to guide the questions that you want to ask your client and the conversation you want to have with your client, then from there, you can make appropriate health promoting recommendations. So does this all make you a little bit curious? Do you want to learn more about constitutional iridology? Just in case you do, registration isn't open, so I'm actually not teaching anything, but I'm going to put a little tiny bit of a plug in right here. And the plug goes like this. In my upcoming course, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, I teach constitutional iridology. I teach it in a way that not only helps you know those markings inside out and upside down, backwards, forwards, and I would say in Latin, but I don't speak Latin, but I also teach you how to ask the questions. What questions would you ask? Why would you ask those questions? Teach you how to triangulate, how to say we've got this marking and this marking and this marking that all work together to give us this information. Now, what questions does that information make me need to ask? So I teach iridology in a way that teaches you how to implement it in whatever your wellness practice is. I've had naturopaths, herbalists, nutritionists. I've had people with no background whatsoever. I've had all kinds of different people with different training, massage therapists. Even I've had previously certified iridologists come in because they had never learned how to apply what they had learned. They learned markings, but they didn't learn application. And that to me is a sin when a teacher teaches like that. Just my opinion. So this course again is designed to give you all of the curriculum you need to prepare you to sit for the certification exam with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. The next course start date is April 16th or April 17th. Why do we have two start dates? We have two start dates because, and I'm just going to move this one little window out of the way for my Instagram friends, because I recognize that a class that runs 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time works really great for North America, and it works really good for England because it's 6 p.m. in England, but it's 3 a.m. in Australia. I don't know about you, but I'm not about to get up. Like if someone was offering a class that I had to attend at 3 a.m., I wouldn't, right? So taking that into account, I decided to create a second section of the class that would be Fridays from 4 till 6 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So again, if Friday afternoons work for you instead of the Thursdays, because you register for one or the other, then you've got some great times for North America. Not so hot for London because that's 11 p.m., but it's 8 a.m. Saturday morning in Australia. So that may work really well for you. So what this course does is it is taught over 20 live 2-hour-long webinars, right? Live interactive. And when we do that, and Sherry Scott is saying, great information, Judith, thank you. Oh, you're welcome, Sherry. So glad you're with us today. When we do this course, we do it over webinar with microphones and cameras on, so we have a conversation. Classes are limited to no more than 10 students per class. So when you register, you'll be asked which section do you want, the Thursday or the Friday, and you don't get to bounce between them. You stay in the one, and that's fine. There will be lots more details coming out when registration opens, but what you need to know is all of your course content is actually recorded and is stored on a student site. So if you need to miss a class, no problem. You can make it up by using the recordings. So if registration's not open yet here, there are 3 ways that you can get on the early registration list to be alerted to when registration is open, because again, there's only 10 seats in each class. The first way is to go to the URL iridology.education. You're going to have on that page a little pop-up box that says, do you want to receive the very best iridology map? When you say yes and you put your information in there, it's going to add you to my database. And that is going to then get you on the list to know when these free trainings are happening, but also when early registration is going to open. The second way, if you don't want to do that, the second way you can do it is just direct message me your email address, and I will manually add you to the database, and we'll mark that you're very interested in the next start date. The third way is you can go onto Facebook and ask to join the Facebook group Iridology Education. Now, when you do that, you have to answer 3 questions. And as long as your answers make sense, I don't care what they are. I just like to know who's coming into the group. I check you out a little bit because, well, let's just face it, there are some people out there that have some strange ideas. And I've learned that it's much easier to not allow people that are going to upset the apple cart into the group than it is to try to do damage control after the fact. So I do vet everybody who joins that group so that it's a safe place for us to talk about iridology, and that is so important. So with all of this information, again, the early registration will be opening February 28th. February 28th. I love that Roberto said on the Zoom chat, he says, I'm really impressed with your approach. It is really practical and makes a lot of sense from the Western medicine perspective. And it's so much more holistic than Western medicine. And I know Roberto is saying that because he has a medical background. And so that's really cool, really cool. But again, early registration opens on February 28th. And there will be special perks for those who register early. Just saying. Regular registration will open mid-March, and those early registration perks will be gone by then, if indeed there are any seats left in the class by then. So feel free to stay in touch with me. You've got the 3 different ways to know when early registration is opening to get that information. The first is to go to iridology.education and opt in for the Iridology map download. The second is to send me privately by direct message your email address so I can add you manually to the group, to my database. And the third way is to go to Facebook and ask to join Iridology Education, and remember to answer the 3 questions that I ask, because if you don't answer them, you don't get in, right? Just saying. There we have it. So that gives you a little bit of information about what an iridologist can and can't say, and can and can't do. I hope that's been useful for you today. And I absolutely look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday. Tuesday at 11 a.m., we're doing a very special webinar, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and that one is going to be Q&A. So for those of you who are practitioners and you do herbology or nutrition or aromatherapy, and you're thinking, yeah, iridology looks good, but how would I use it in my business? Well, we're going to answer those questions on Tuesday. We're going to answer all the questions about how do you use iridology in a practice? What benefit is it? How does it help your clients? How does it help you as the practitioner? And we're going to really help you make this real so you can begin deciding whether you want to join us for the next go round of Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology. So I hope to see you on Tuesday. And again, if you're on my database, you will receive the registration link for Tuesday within the next few days. If you're in the Facebook group, you'll get the registration link for the webinar there as well. And if you're on Instagram, you know where to find me. We will see you again on Tuesday. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone, and have a fabulous, marvelous weekend. Bye for now.